They're out of film.
Uh-oh, we've already spotted one. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Butch Patrick panel. Hey, there we go, that's right. You can't let Butch be the only one raising the roof here. So, Butch, thank you so much for joining us here in Hamilton. How's the time been so far?
Time's been wonderful. I always have a good time up here, so thanks very much for having me in.
Well, it's great to be. Now, you've come to Hamilton a few times now.
I have.
Yeah, so you must be a fan of the Steel City.
I have friends in the area, and I've been up here a few times, so yeah, I am a fan.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about what everyone obviously is here to talk about. Let's talk about the Munsters, which ran at Universal Studios from 1964 to 66. Spun off a few movies, some reboots, a lot of reboots. Talk about your time and, how you got into playing the iconic Eddie Munster.
Well, it was weird. I worked from 1960 to 1972 in the business regularly, which was a great window. It was very much pop culture at its best. Before the Munsters, I did a year of the Real McCoys, and I did a year of General Hospital. So I was sort of a seasoned veteran at the time, but I wasn't even living in Hollywood during the original casting of the Munsters. Fans of the show they've seen the unaired pilot, which featured a different mom and a different kid. Happy Durman as Eddie and Joan Marshall as a character called Phoebe instead of Lily. But at the last minute, before they went into production, CBS apparently had second thoughts about the mom and Eddie characters. So what they did is they had already looked at every kid in Hollywood, and they had narrowed it down to 2 more kids after Happy Durman to a screen test. And my agent convinced them to fly me in from Illinois, where I was living with my grandmother. So they did, and I went from the airport to the studio, got the part. My mom was living in Washington, D.C. with my professional baseball playing stepfather, so I didn't have a family out there. So I moved in with my uncle. We hired a woman to take me to work, and for the next 2 years, the Munsters was literally my #1 family because my family was on the East Coast. I would fly back and visit them maybe once a month. So yeah, there was all kinds of interesting things going on at Universal during that time, and my favorite thing to do, when I was doing the Munsters, that was my job. But when I completed my book called Munster Memories, they asked me, what was your favorite memory? And for that, I told them, I said, my favorite memory was, little boys like to explore. So here I am, 11, 12 years old, and I have some time on my hands. I got the whole Universal Studios at my disposal to go wander around and, do this and do that. And my favorite destination was always the McHale's Navy Lagoon, because Ernie Borgnine and Tim Conway were such nice people. And then my uncle supplied horses to the westerns in Hollywood, so he would be over supplying horses to either Wagon Train or the Virginian, and it was like go see Uncle John and hang out with Ward Bond and William Smith, and it was just a great time to be a kid. Especially, it was work, but it was great memories too.
It sounds like a lot of fun, and we see a lot of child actors throughout the year that can't handle the pressure, which has got to be really hard. How were you able to kind of stay the straight and narrow? Was it just because it was a different time, or because it seemed like you had the world in your hands?
Well, straight and narrow. You got to remember it was the 60s, first of all. And growing up in the 60s, I'm 65, I was born in 53. So when I turned 8, 9 years old, it was the beginning of the 60s. And then at the end of 1969, the summer of 69, I got my first car. I went to Brazil 3 months, unchaperoned. My mom didn't go, my teacher didn't go. So I was down there for doing a movie. And as my sister likes to say, when I got almost 8 years sober, so when I go to my chip meetings, my sister says I left as Richie Cunningham, and 3 months later I came back as John Lennon. So it gives you an idea of where my life went at the age of 16 in Hollywood. I got into a lot of things I probably shouldn't have, but I was always functioning. I kept working, and I wanted to party, and I did it well, and I had fast cars and lived at the beach and surfed and really had a great time because I figured I'd been working, for 12 years. I was entitled to go crazy. I didn't plan on it lasting 40 years. Nobody does. But everything's good now, and the thing with Hollywood in the 60s is, you could get away with it. Everybody was drinking, everybody was partying, everybody was, Sunset Strip and Haight-Ashbury in the Bay Area. It was the drug culture.
Right.
And it just lasted for a long time.
Well, congratulations on 8 years of sobriety. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And who would have thought? funny, I'm sitting next to Dave Faustino, and I haven't seen Dave since I got sober. And he says, man, he goes, you look younger than you did 10 years ago. I know. So it's good to be on this side of the fence, yeah, no doubt.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So can you tell us any kind of cool stories from the lot there? Because like you said, this was the golden era.
Well, pop culture was at its peak in the 60s, no doubt about it. Before the Munsters, I was lucky enough to do shows like Mr. Ed and My Favorite Martian, and then after the Munsters, we did some classic pop culture stuff. I Dream of Jeannie, and one of my favorite things that I did was for Chuck Jones. I did a movie called The Phantom Toll Booth, which was based on a really great children's book. But even better than that was the Beatles came to the Munster set one day, and I was off work that day, and I missed meeting the Beatles. But I made up for it by getting probably my favorite role of all time was the Monkees Christmas episode. I got to perform with the Monkees, and I spent a whole week with the guys. And the script that I was in, I was like their equal. I was in every scene with them. I was kind of like the guest star, and it was a wonderful experience. And to this day, you know, I'm still friends with them all. I mean, obviously Davey passed away, but Mickey and I see each other all the time. Peter, Mike's a little bit standoffish, but I have met him. And when people ask me, what was your favorite time to work? And I told them, I told everybody in school when I got the interview that I was going to be on the Monkees, because they were like bigger than life in 1967, 68. They were huge. They were as big as the Beatles, maybe even bigger in the States.
Right.
So, and they had a TV show, which was very cool.
That's a great time to be alive. I'm sure, and a great time to be a part of all of that. You know, where do you go on? Like once the Munsters ends in '64, what happens from there?
I went over and continued working. I did a few years of My Three Sons. I was always Ernie's best friend, and I think I did 20 episodes across like 3 years. Disney movies, which when you're a kid, that's pretty much the state-of-the-art place to be. I remember I was out there with Kurt Russell and Leslie Ann Warren and John Davidson and stuff, and other kids and adults as well. I was lucky enough to have met Walt, which was really cool on my bucket list. And people ask me who's the most influential people or the most famous people you ever met. Walt's always at the top of the list. And did some work with Evel Knievel and met Rod Serling. He's, the Twilight Zone is my favorite all-time show. And that boy, I tell you, you wonder where those ideas come from. He was not of this planet. I don't know where he came from or where he got those ideas, but he was tapped into something way beyond what we know.
What do you think of Jordan Peele rejuvenating the Twilight Zone?
I think it's great. I think it's a tough bar to attain the level that Rod Serling did. But yeah, he was wonderful. The thing, George Barris too comes to mind. George Barris created the Munster Coach and the Dragula for us, but he also did the Monkey Mobile and the General Lee and almost all the TV movie cars you would ever see. And as a 12-year-old kid, my favorite place to go on Wednesdays when I had a long lunch was to go to the hobby shop to pick up a piece of slot car track or a slot car for my home track, but go to George's shop and see what he was up to. And that's where I met Sinatra, and I met Elvis, I met Sonny and Cher, and all the people in Hollywood were all picking up their George Barris customs. Mm-hmm. And that was like the coolest thing to do, because while everybody was building the Munster Coach model, I was riding around in the real thing, which was very cool.
Amazing. And I just can't believe, like, some of the names, like, and you're saying them so casually. Yeah, just Elvis, the Monkees, no big deal. Just the run-of-the-mill guys.
I was very lucky, and another interesting part, I would just go to the studio and do my job, and I live 25 miles away down in the Beach District, and I just try to keep a regular low-key lifestyle going. I work here, but I didn't tell anybody what was going on. But my mom had married a professional baseball player, so my favorite thing to do was to go to the ballpark early and shag flies into the stands when the pros were playing, long before anybody else was allowed in the stadium. So that was like a really cool thing. And then when I turned 16, I got into drag racing, and I started going to the track with Jack Crispin and his family, and he invented the funny car. I thought I was going to be a funny car driver for a time until I figured out that I didn't have the cojones to do it.
Right.
So it was fun for me to go to the track, but I was not going to be a driver, maybe a team owner or something. But one thing led to another. In between acting and movies, I was lucky enough to be around very exciting things to do. So I just felt everybody had this kind of life, so I never really appreciated it until later.
Right. which is usually the way it is, in reflection. So let me ask you, you mentioned a couple times about your stepfather being a professional baseball player. Would you let us know who he was and who he played for?
Sure. His name was Ken Hunt, and he came up through the Yankees as a rookie. He went to the Angels in the '61 expansion. He was Mickey Mantle's roommate. They were grooming him to be heir apparent to center field. He was Roger Maris's lifelong friend. They were both from North Dakota. They were actually buried in the same cemetery within throwing distance of each other. My brother's godfather was actually Moose Skowron, Bill Skowron from the Yankees in the '60s. He went to the Angels, dislocated his shoulder during a game, and he never really recovered his throwing arm. So he only played 5 years. He wound up with the Senators and the Chicago Cubs, which ironically, the episode of Herman the Rookie, Leo DeRocher, guest starred. I got my dad his one and only acting job. He was the catcher. When they threw the ball home, he goes, no, not me, Leo, I'm going back to the minors. How ironically, because the next day he did go back to the minors, where he quit baseball forever. So that was my stepdad, but it was a great time for me to be hanging around the ballparks and doing the father and son game and that kind of stuff. That was nice.
Nice. And we talked a little bit about Disney and how Disney was kind of the mecca. That's where every actor wanted to be, honestly, at that point. Can you talk a little bit like what it was like to be part of that Disney family? Especially then, that was the beginning.
Well, the episodes that I did, they used to have a show called Walt Disney's Wonderful World of Color, and I think it was on Sunday nights or Saturday nights. It was always a weekend deal, and one summer I did two-parters, which was usually there's just 1 hour. These were two-hour ones, and I worked the whole summer out there. And that was really a cool situation. And then I did a couple of features for him, not as a star, but as a supporting role. I worked with Walter Brennan and, like I say, John Davidson, Leslie Ann Warren, and Kurt Russell and stuff. But Disney was great because my grandfather used to be an animator out there. And he actually was you ever see the Borden cow, Elsie? Elsie the Borden cow, he actually drew her. But he was working for Disney at the time, so anything you drew for Disney while you were there was Disney's name. But I enjoyed it because it was a very cool studio. It was very clean. It was like Disneyland behind the gates. And the commissary, they had the best food. And it was just a great place to be as a kid because that was... it was Disney.
Okay, so my last question for you before we open it up to the fans here.
Sure.
Now, there's been plenty of reboots already of the Munsters, and we are living in the era of reboots, where a lot of people think Hollywood may have run out of ideas, but how do you feel about this? Like how it's going on and stuff like that. Are you up for the reboots, or are you more into like the rejuvenations, like we got the Murphy Browns coming back and things of that nature?
I look at it as they're running out of ideas and they're going to the well too often. That's my thought on it. But at the same time, it's an honor, and it's sort of a what is the imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Exactly.
So the deal with the Munsters reboot, it's funny, the Addams Family, they've both been rebooted. The Addams Family went to stage plays and they went to feature films. They never really did a TV remake. The Munsters was remade by Lloyd Schwartz, who was Sherwood Schwartz's son, who did obviously Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch. And it was with John Schuck and Lee Merriweather. And it ran, I think, for 3 years, but it was really, it wasn't very good. But because it was the Munsters, a lot of kids who'd never seen the original watched it in color, and it ran 3 years. A friend of mine, who's a huge Munsters fan, said, "It's so bad it makes you guys look like Gone with the Wind." So on that note, they're now making a new one. Seth Meyers, they did Mockingbird Lane about 5 years ago. Some people haven't seen it. It was
Jerry
O'Connell, Portia de Rossi, Eddie Izzard, and but it was done by Bryan Singer. Everybody knows who Bryan Singer is, director of the Marvel and X-Men. Huge budget, $10 million was spent. Brian Fuller wrote it, who did Dead Like Me and Pushing Up Daisies. So they had all these great people involved with it, and yet it wasn't bad. I mean, I actually introduced it at San Diego Comic-Con, I think 6 years ago, but it didn't get picked up. And it was kind of a bummer because I was looking forward to it. They actually had a role for me. I would have enjoyed it. I was there the last day of the shoot. I got to meet everybody. I actually sat next to Sir Ian McKellen watching with Bryan Singer the thing, and he's asking me questions about what was it like doing the Munster reps, and it's like, gee, this guy. I was very impressed. Wow, he's actually taking the time to talk to me. So yeah, exactly, night. But Seth Meyers' people have actually contacted us, and I gave them a couple ideas because they're moving the show to Brooklyn, to where the Munsters would be living in Brooklyn. So on that note, I suggested a couple ideas. I told him that he could use my cars because I have a Munster coach and a Dragula that I tour the country with if he needs a vehicle. So we'll see. Hopefully it'll work out.
And Seth Meyers has a little bit of pull. Just a little bit of pull.
Yeah. He doesn't know. I think he might do it. I think moving him back to New York, I suggested to him, I said, well, they're going to need a job. So, maybe Herman could be an Uber driver with the Munster coach. Or Grandpa and Herman could have a theater where they show home movies to them, but they're actually monster movies to everybody else. And something along that nature. So we'll see.
Awesome. Amazing. All right. So we can open up questions from the fans, sir, if anyone's got anything. Oh, first one up. Do you watch your old episodes? Did you have a favorite?
Actually, I have several old episode favorites, but the reason I enjoy watching them isn't so much to see myself. I like seeing the set designs and all the technical stuff that I didn't take, that I sort of took for granted and I didn't take into account originally. Because the success of the show is multi-level. It's yes, they had funny scripts, and yes, they had pretty good acting team, but Universal was the monster studio. In the old days, every studio had sort of a specialty. MGM did musicals, Fox did disaster movies, Universal was the monster movie set. You can't beat the earlier Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, Mummy, and so on and so on. So, with that in mind, they took the best of both worlds. The producers had done Leave It to Beaver for 6 years, so they had a very friendly family formula down. And then you take the best monster movie to design the sets and film it and light it and dress it with all the cobwebs and stuff, and you have like a mini famous monster movie intertwined with Leave It to Beaver, and you had a really cool thing. So I always enjoyed looking at beyond the acting to the sets and stuff and the special effects. That's what I enjoyed, and the makeup.
Who were some of the fans or some of the other child actors of the era that you used to hang out with at the time? Because you said like the Munsters were basically your family, right?
Right. I was the only kid at Universal for that 2 years, but we would have guest stars come on. Bill Mooney, who's a very good friend these days, and did all kinds of work. I worked pretty much, and he owned Hollywood. And it's amazing how much work this guy cranked out, really. And in between, playing music and doing music, he's amazing. And he's an artist as well. I remember I had a guest star, Peter Robbins, who guest starred on the show once, and he was doing the voice of Charlie Brown. So I thought, wow, that's so cool. Charlie Brown's going to come visit, Larry Mazzio, but better as Larry Matthews from the Dick Van Dyke Show, is a good friend. The Livingston brothers. Don Grady was my agent's son. Mary Grady, my only agent ever. I actually lived with them for a while when my mom was gone. So Don was living there. He was out in the pool house. He had his own little room. But the Livingston brothers come to mind, and a few others.
Nice, amazing. Any other questions from the crowd? Oh, sorry, get you first.
Al Lewis, yeah, Grandpa. Al was my mentor. He was a good friend of mine. After the show was over, I didn't really connect with him because I was a kid until I was in my 30s. But when I did, Al and Pat Priest and I started working together. And Al was a wonderful guy, loved basketball. Had a restaurant, he had a radio show, he ran for public office, he was all over the place. And in New York, he would walk down the street and stop traffic because hey, everybody knew Grandpa, That's called the House Divided, where they made a go-kart, Herman wrecked it, and then Grandpa out of it. They put a big white stripe down the middle of the house because they were arguing about who owned the house, who put the down payment, and this and that. That was a good episode.
Well, I see.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. There's a lot of good episodes. Some of my favorites are Zombo, where the TV host, Eddie's nickname, where I grew a beard, Hot Rod Herman, Go to the Drag Strip was a good one. A lot of those are Herman wants to perform to not disappoint his son. Like the Herman the Rookie, we've got the basketball one, we've got the golf one, we've got the where he's the coach at the track meet. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yes. Right in the back there, Leafs.
It was basically, there was never a state attached to it. We assumed it was probably the United States. But the creative licenses, like, Marilyn Munster would have never had the last name Munster. Herman was Herman was Frankenstein, Lily was a vampire. How did I become a werewolf? So it was called creative license. They had a lot of creative license in the development of the show. Yeah, Mockingbird USA.
Or Springfield.
Mockingbird Heights, yeah.
Right up here. Whatever happened to Wolf?
He's home. I got him 5 years after the show. I was out doing an Ironside, and the prop master came up to me and gave him to me and said, "Put this in your car. Don't let anybody look at him." And I took him home, and I hung him from a noose in the bay window at the beach. And the sun got to him, and he deteriorated and fell apart. But I had him restored. But I do have him. Yes.
Amazing. 1 second, right up front here, Ryu.
How did I become a werewolf?
The show. Did they ever address how
it's like the Simpsons. Tell me, you father was a Frankenstein and your mother was a vampire. How in the heaven did you ever become a werewolf? Basically creative license again. They needed a werewolf. And we had Uncle Lester and we had Uncle Gil. Uncle Gil was the creature of the Black Lagoon. Uncle Lester was a wolf man, and I suppose they needed a smaller wolf person in the household, and I was designated.
Awesome.
Are you taking questions from somebody who's not here?
It's Silent Bob, so Silent Bob can't say anything. That is commitment to character.
That is. Don't break character. One more time.
How did you feel taking over a role of someone else who actually played it first?
No, not at all. It happens all the time in Hollywood. There's like two things that happen in Hollywood. You take over roles or you give up roles. I had a role with an unknown, it's 1971, an unknown director with the name of George Lucas shows up at the beach one day while I'm surfing and asked me, "Would you cut your hair to do this little movie about cars in Modesto?" I go, "No, my hair's down to here." Since 1971, I look like somebody in the Doobie Brothers. And I go, "I'm not about to cut my hair for your little movie up in Modesto about cars." And 2 years later, I go and see the movie. It's called American Graffiti. And the part that I turned down was Richard Dreyfuss's part. And it's like, but you think that's bad. Paul LeMat, who was in that movie, Big John Milner, he turned down Han Solo's part for Star Wars.
Yeah.
So you get these stories of people missing the boat on the biggest roles of their life.
It wasn't Harrison Ford was like the carpenter on set of Star Wars. He wasn't even an actor.
Yeah, he was a carpenter, and he remembered him from he drove the car in the race.
Right.
Graffiti. But yeah, I mean, his carpenter skills were like, you ever see the movie Witness? Where he goes out and lives with the Amish people?
Right.
He was great.
Very committed to character, just like Silent Bob over there. Any other questions over here? Look at that.
No questions about Mickey?
Do you have Mickey Dolenz?
It's funny how things can work in life. A friend of mine handles Mickey Dolenz and the Monkees now, and she was a big Monkees fan about 10 years ago, and I knew that. So Davy Jones was going to be coming to a show, and I put him on the phone with her just because I wanted her to meet, and he wound up passing away before they actually met.
No.
So she at least got to talk to Davy. Then I put her on the phone with Mickey Dolenz, and then I put her on the phone with Peter Turk. Now she does all of Mickey's bookings, and you're looking at the #1 Mickey Dolenz fan in the world right
there.
And she says, Jacqueline lives in Toronto. She was assigned to be my assistant at a Monkees convention.
Oh, wow.
That's how we met.
Wow.
Because they couldn't put her with Mickey because she would fake. So yeah, that's actually one of my favorite stories is getting to know Mickey Dolenz because he was a great kid actor, circus boy, and what a career he's had,
Yeah, one of the original boy bands, really, the Monkees. When you think about it, I'd say the Beatles were probably the first boy band out there, and then the Monkees took it from there.
Yeah, they were great. It was wonderful.
Amazing.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That was a very big disappointment. I was really happy to do it. They flew me out. I'm expecting to run into some of the people there that are involved with it. They walk you into a big room, 17 microphones in a circle, and you're the only one in there. And you're by yourself, and you're sort of like ad-libbing this swinging from the chandelier. Whoa! And it's like no dialogue. Now you're swinging this way. Whoa! And it's like, okay, this was fun, and nobody was there. Good news is they give you really good stuff. You know, I got my favorite jacket. They gave me a Simpsons Letterman's jacket. They gave me a ton of crusty stuff. They gave me a bunch of Simpsons stuff. So that was my experience with the Simpsons. I'm glad I did it because at the time it was season 11, and I thought, well, when this show goes off the air, before it goes off the air, I'd like to be part of the fraternity of voices. Well, little did I know, it's never going to go off the air.
What is it, 20 years right now?
26.
26.
It came on in 90, 28. It's never going off the air. There'll never be a rap party.
I still remember watching it on the Tracy Ullman show.
When they started.
When they first started it as a little skit. Go ahead. How long did makeup take?
Makeup for me took an hour. Fred Gwynn was 2 hours. Everybody else was in the middle of that window, except for Pat Priest, who obviously took about 2 seconds. She showed up in makeup.
Awesome. Can you talk a little bit about the crew, because you mentioned how they were your family.
Yeah.
You know, talk about your relationships that you had with Fred and Sharon and Al.
Fred and Al, first of all, they were a great comedy team. They really were funny. They'd been together on Car 54. Al took the role of Grandpa in like nobody's business, and he really loved that character. As Fred became a great hermit as well. But together, those two had some very funny comedy routines. I learned the most from Fred about acting, because they would write some scripts for us with a father and son little talks that we would have. And then Al was more of the outdoor kind of guy and throw the frisbee and toss a baseball and let you be a little boy, where Fred didn't have that kind of time because he was always working. Right. So I learned a little bit from each one of them. And Yvonne, being mom, she had 2 sons about my age. She would occasionally bring them to the set. She thought that was a good thing for me because, you have kids around, but I didn't really like kids. They used to call me a 39-year-old midget just because I acted so old. So I would sort of tolerate her kids. And then Pat Priest had 2 kids my age, and she never brought them to the set. But the point being is they all had kid-friendly situations where it made it easy for me to be there. And I was pretty good at what I did, and I came prepared, and I never held up production by not being prepared and knowing my lines, so it worked out really well.
Another question? Right over here. How did you like working with the real McCoys?
Oh, that was actually very cool, because I knew Dick Crenna from Armis Brooks. That was what I was watching as a kid. I remember him in Evard, so he had that little squeaky voice, and he was playing a character. But my mom introduced me to Walter Brennan, who I didn't know it at the time, but he won 3 supporting actor awards in a row, in the late 30s and 40s. So he was a really strong star power who was doing television. So when we did the show, they had adjusted it to where it was only 3 guys. It was only Amos, Papina, and Luke. They had lost the little Luke, and Cassie and Sugar Babe were all gone. So for a love interest for Luke, my mother inherited the farm next door as a widow, and Luke would come over and sort of help us out, and he had romantic interest in my mom. So, and to get my mom's attention, he would take me fishing a lot. So that was my job. That was my job, to ride the pony over and go fishing with Luke. But as far as hanging out with them, they were very nice to me. And I remember vividly about Amos, Walter Brennan being such a strong actor.
Now, we talked a lot about the dynamic on the Munsters between yourself and Fred and, of course, Al. It seemed like this was one of the first shows that showed that real dynamic, that was that patriarchy down to their son, where you see from grandfather to father to son, and giving life lessons, where it wasn't, the stern lessons that you were getting on Bonanza, right? Yours was more family-oriented. It was kind of a turn of the age.
Well, yes, and the reason for that was, you got to remember, this was a 60s where there was a lot of civil unrest, and there was a lot of stuff going on in the 60s of protest, and there was just a lot of things going on. So what the Munsters was a very soft-handed approach to don't judge a book by its cover. Beauty is in the eyes of the beholder. All of those little cliches that come up about, skin deep and this and that. The Munsters had those. So there would be some talks. For instance, when I grew a beard, and at the end of the show, my beard disappears in the soup. And Herman goes, Eddie, did you learn anything with this? And I said, yes, I'll never make fun of mom's soup again. No, that's not it. And here's his little, and this is, I see this all the time, so no, it doesn't matter what color you are, or what you look like, or this or that, it's the size of your heart and the strength of your character. So these little talks would be ending the show, and Grandpa would come up and say, Herman, you ain't perfect, but you're all right. You're not perfect, but you're all right. And the show would end, and everybody would have a little lesson to be learned, and we would be off until next Thursday night when another situation would come forward where Eddie would have a lesson to learn, or Herman would have a lesson to learn. But they were very much very strong shows, totally G-rated, family values, good stuff, and that's one of the reasons that it holds up so well, because people are really looking back for that kind of stuff, and that's why there's so many nostalgia channels that do so well.
Right, exactly. And it was a great show, one of the first shows to provide that social commentary for people that you really weren't getting out there.
Well, and the fact that, it's a unique show about the monster, the makeup factor. On paper, you would look at this and say, "Oh, this is never going to fly. This is ridiculous." But the fact that they had talking horses, you had Martians, you had witches, you had genies, you had very non-reality based shows that were doing well, and people just wanted to be entertained. They wanted to come home, watch TV, which was the entertainment for the evening. There was no internet, there was no cable. This was at 3 channels in most of the country. And you picked one of the 3 things you wanted to watch, and it happened to be the Munsters. That was going to be your entertainment. That's why people remember it so vividly, and they think it's been on for 5 or 6 years, because in 2 years we did 70 episodes, and that's about 5 years worth today.
Right, exactly. Any other questions? Nope.
A little louder.
What was your favorite remake of the Monsters? Oh, what's your favorite opening?
Well, the first one, the first opening, coming down the stairs, going through the door, I didn't particularly care for that, because the original opening was the Live with the Beaver, Donna Reed opening, where the mom, the family's going off into the world, and here's your lunch, and here's your job, and here's your lunchbox, and it was basically a tribute to the mom and the keeping the household, afloat and control, which was like the Donna Reed show and Leave It to Beaver. Yeah. Yes.
Any ad-libbing, or were they pretty strict verbatim?
Yeah, we followed the script. I'll tell you why. It was shot on film, and film was expensive. So, and another thing was they rehearsed it to death because of the special effects. So we had to get it right the first time, because to redress the set for the door being hung, or like the mantle falling off, or me being thrown through the ceiling, throwing all the stuff down, if it didn't work the first time, it took half an hour, which in studio time is like $10,000. So we were very, very much on following cue constantly, and if there was a mistake, they certainly didn't develop the film to have a blooper reel. That's why you'll never see bloopers.
Nice. Do we have another one?
Yes, sir.
Was the staircase remote control?
No. It's funny when you look at the TV screen, because I can look at it differently, because I know exactly what's going on 2 inches off the screen. There's a guy with a coffee cup and a cigarette, or a big grip holding a rope, pulling down the hinge to see all this magical stuff that happens. So no, there was 2 guys in the back of the stairway. It was hinged, and it had springs, and one guy would pull it, and the other guy would activate the spot flames and the breath and stuff.
Now, where do you stand? Because you guys were kind of on the precipice of special effects back then. You guys were at the forefront. Looking at where it started and where it is now, what are your thoughts on that? Like, I know there's a lot of people that are against the CG. Where do you stand on the side of practical effects towards more of the computer generated?
Well, it's funny you mention that, because the 2 guys, Chuck and Davey, were the special effects, our department, 2 men. They both went on to do separately. One went over to Steven Spielberg, and the other one headed up George Lucas. So we had the best guys in Hollywood early in their careers before they went on their merry way to head up big, giant studio departments. I'm not a big, I understand the CG thing, and I understand it allows you to do things that could never be done before, but I'm an old school guy who I just enjoy a storyline. I mean, I even enjoy black and white movies. I like Paper Moon, I like Raging Bull, I like old school stuff that just shows a story. But I mean, I like old monster movies. I'm not a big into the Saws and the Hostels and all this kind of, I like old school Creature of the Black Lagoon, maybe The Birds, some Hitchcock stuff, because, it could happen. I like that kind of stuff. I like the old sci-fi movies from the 50s, it's them and, the Natives from Mars and things of that nature.
Did you appreciate the remake?
Not so much.
Mars Attacks.
Mars Attacks was good. Mars Attacks was hilarious. That was funny. I enjoyed that very much. I had a chance to buy one of those Martian things too for $200. I should have bought it, but I couldn't get it home.
Very nice. So what do you have going on nowadays? You're doing a lot of the cons and.
Well, I bought the Munster Coach and Dragon cars a few years ago, and I bought my grandma's house that I used to live in when I was 13 in the Midwest, and then I got married. So the combination of getting married, the cars, and the house all in a 2-year window placed me on the ground doing automotive events and racetracks and this and that. The Comic Cons are great. It's just they take up a 30 by 30 foot spot, so a lot of the promoters can't give up that kind of space for me to be there. Like right now, I'm here without them. There is the guy that used to do Super Scary Saturday for TBS about 30 years ago, Al Lewis, contacted me. We're developing a live stream show, a subscriber show for next year called Eddie's Monstrous Movie Mausoleum. And what we're going to do is we're going to host monster movies, obviously, the worst movies we can find. But the kicker is going to be I'm going to be the straight man, and I'm going to have different horror hosts from around the country be my co-star during each episode.
Nice.
So the deal will be, the premise is I've inherited the Game & Goodberry Graves Casket Company. These horror hosts are my casket reps around the country. Selling caskets is my business. And we will be featuring funny horror movies and slicing and dicing them up without without Elvira's cleavage.
Well, you hacked me until right there.
Yeah.
For a second, yeah.
So I will have so far we've got Dr. Paul Bearer, we have Edgar Winter, we'll probably get Svengoolie involved, all the horror hosts around the country. The deal is if they'll participate in my show, I'll participate in their show, so it's a nice barter system.
And let's we talk a little bit about the live stream. This is kind of the new medium. We've had another paradigm shift as of late, and it seems network TV is kind of in the ages of the dodo almost.
Well, I know nothing about it. I'm old school. When I was a kid, we had a roll of dimes and payphones, and that's how I grew up. But nowadays, the gentleman that's doing it, Jeff Grimshaw, who did the Super Scary Saturday as a young man, he teaches communications at University of Vermont. So I got the right guy to collaborate with.
Right.
He loves the Munsters. He's got a proven track record. This is the new paradigm, as you said. So I told him I would be more than happy to do it. The good news is you can do a whole season in about 2 weeks.
Oh, perfect.
You can knock the whole thing out. It'll give me with the subscription fan base, it's only $10 a year, so it's very affordable. Very affordable. We'll start throwing information out as we travel around. I got 19,000 members in my fan group. So I look at it as it'll probably be very successful because I have the right people, and then I have a fan base that is strong enough that I don't think it'll be a problem to get 50,000, 60,000 subscribers.
Perfect.
So that'll be fun.
And I'm sure we've got a bunch of them right here today too. So
Yeah.
$10 a year, that's unheard of.
That's when he said that.
That's less than $1 a month.
I said $10 a month. He goes, no, $10 a year. I go, sign me up.
Right.
Let's give it a shot. See what happens.
Even I could afford that.
Yeah. Hell, we're giving them away.
Amazing. Anybody else?
One more.
One more here.
Hey, Jeff.
Why did Pat Priest take over?
Beverly Owen, this is a good story, especially since Bill Diamond's here. Have you seen Bill Diamond set up there with Fraggle Rock and all the puppets? Beverly Owen's agent, she lived in New York, and she was dating a guy who was the producer for Captain Kangaroo. She was madly in love. But her agent got her this interview for Marilyn Munster for this show called The Munsters in Hollywood. She didn't want to go to Hollywood. She didn't want to live in Hollywood. The agent told her, I guarantee you this show will not see the light of day. I guarantee you, just go out for the paycheck, you'll be there a week, you'll be home next Monday. Well, lo and behold, she goes and does it, show becomes a hit. Now she's stuck in LA. She cries every day, she knits. She cries every day, she knits. She's living with Fred Gwynn and his wife, and finally, they went to the producers and told them that you gotta let this woman go home. This is like really harsh and unusual punishment. They go, no, we got a hit show, she's an integral part of this show, she's not going anywhere. So Fred and Al got together and basically told them, if you do not let her go, we will quit, you won't have a show at all. So they let her go, and Pat Priest stepped in. What happened was they blackballed her from ever working again. But the good news is her husband and her sweetie-to-be, they got married, and they created Sesame Street together. So it was a happy ending, so that's a good thing.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that's big news. You know, I love Captain Kangaroo, but Sesame Street, that's good stuff.
It's the one that keeps giving to us all.
That's right.
So, has everyone been entertained?
How are you not entertained?
Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I want to say thank you to everyone who came to join us, and especially thank you to Butch for coming out here. And this has been a great time.
Thank you. If you haven't been to the table, come on back and say hi. Bye-bye. Thank you.